Good afternoon, and thanks very much for joining us. This is Sean Bosnell from CareWorks. I'm the VP of Vendor and Product Management, and I'm here to get you guys started off today. A few sort of housekeeping things before we get going. Everybody is muted, so if you want to ask us any questions, by all means, go ahead and do so. Just use the chat box in the GoToMeeting window. We have our staff sitting here waiting for your questions, and we'll answer you as soon as we can. Secondly, we're also recording this webinar, so if you want to see it at a later date, a link will be sent out after the call to all the attendees, so they'll be able to view it at a later date. We're going to be talking today a little bit about data security and protection. We want to make sure that you guys kind of understand all the different areas of data security and protection, and are you covered? So why are you here today, or what you're going to get out of the meeting today is, whether you've got a large organization or a small one, there's always threats coming in. They're going to come in from email. They're going to come in from websites. They're even going to come in from people within your organization who may have a USB device and are not, they just don't know that there might be something wrong with that USB device. Ultimately, our end goal of this webinar is to give you information. We're not trying to scare you. We're not trying to, make it seem like the internet is a completely bad place. We just want to make sure that you're prepared and have all the information you need to protect yourself. And we want to make sure that you understand that while it sounds like there might be a lot going on to try to make this happen, all these different areas that these threats are coming from, it doesn't have to be an onerous task. There are a lot of things that you can do to protect yourself on a day-to-day basis, as well as your organization. So we're just going to touch on many of those things today, just so you're a little better prepared. Overall, on the webinar, we're going to cover a couple of the common threats that you're going to see to your data security. We're going to give you a couple of real-life examples on people who were impacted by some of these threats, and give you some ideas on what you can do to protect yourself from the same issues. The things that we're going to cover for you today on protecting your organization will go everywhere from basic anti-spam, which will help to stop those viruses, malware, and Trojans from reaching you via email, your endpoint protection, or your antivirus, anti-malware, and patch management, your edge routers or firewalls, so the things that are controlling your internet coming into your corporate environment, business continuity or data backup, making sure that should any of these things get through, you still have a way to recover. Cloud backup, a bit more information on how we're going to be able to make sure that all your data is backed up. Even if you're using cloud-based solutions, it's very critical that you also have a cloud backup, and we'll explain a little bit further on why that's important to you. And we'll talk about EMR backup as well. A little bit more about us, in case you're not fully aware of who we are. CareWorks is a top 100 managed IT solutions provider and the market leader in the senior care. CareWorks is in the senior care industry's largest provider of managed point of care, EMR, mobile computing, support, and wireless networking solutions. To date, we've got over 500,000 seniors that receive better care because of the work that CareWorks is doing. Going through our numbers, we've been in business for over 14 years. Today, there's over 60,000 devices in use. 4,400 plus senior care facilities are utilizing CareWorks technology. And after 3 years, 98% of all of the kiosks that we've rolled out are still in use. And we have 120 plus people on the team today. Our service desk makes up the majority of those people, with over 80. And just real quickly, I want to hand over the call to Jason Brown. He's our Director of Client Success, and he's going to be managing the call with you guys throughout the call. I'll be here to help out and offer any assistance I can. But Jason, please take it away.
Okay, so I just want to take the time to thank everybody for jumping on the call today. I know everybody's got a busy schedule, so we really appreciate you taking the time. I really just want to jump into the topic. So obviously you can see on the screen here a bunch of different news clippings of some different issues, data and cybersecurity-wise. So jumping really into today's topic, you don't really have to look far for threats these days when it comes to data security. We've all seen the recent news reports over the past 6 months or so about ransomware, malicious activity like viruses, phishing scams, as well as data loss related to natural disasters like Hurricane Harvey even. playing upon people's inherent curiosity, in some cases actually desire to help people in a time of crisis. The people who create these threats don't actually care who you are, how big your business is, what type of industry you work within. They're out to exploit weaknesses for their own financial or personal gain. And to be honest, they're very, very good at it. So the possibility of security breaches is a significant issue for any organization, including the healthcare sector. On the screen, like I mentioned, you see mentions of the National Health Service in the UK being hit with the WannaCry ransomware attack in May of this year. This attack essentially shut down the hospital systems and satellite offices. Basically, staff had to revert to pen and paper in order to perform the most basic of tasks. The public was told that they should only go to hospitals in case of emergency. Everything else was canceled or shut down. So one of the biggest issues we're all facing when it comes to attacks like this is the inability to use and access the mission-critical data that allows us to do our jobs. And in the case of senior care, that's providing care to our residents. So what is the common factor to many of the threats that can infiltrate your networks and cause security breaches? It's people. It's your employees. It's Jan in accounting or Bob in the director's office. People are often the weak link. At least one person on your team will click on anything, visit any website, or open any attachment from any email address they get. Human error is really the biggest issue here when it comes to these threats, but it isn't always an external threat that can cause problems. Data loss or breaches can also be the result of an unhappy employee, but more often than not, it's the result of an error in judgment, an accidental deletion, but that still won't get back to data unless you're protected. So in all seriousness, cyber attacks today are getting much more sophisticated. Scam emails can easily look like they're coming from a trusted source or even from your own company, as an example. Numerous ways that data breaches can occur. You've heard of many of them. Sorry, excuse me. Viruses, malware, hacking, phishing, etc. There's even reported cases where someone intentionally drops a USB key in a parking lot. An employee then finds the key and pick it up. Curiosity gets the better of them. They're like, oh, I wonder what this is. Might as well plug it into my computer and see what it is. So they plug it into their corporate device and bingo, they're infected and your network's infected. So we just want to stress, and we're going to mention it, and you'll probably hear it multiple times throughout the call, really training and staff education, and there's a big human element when it comes to cybersecurity and keeping yourself protected. So we'll go over a couple of little slides showing some information of malware over the last couple of years. The number of threats to data security are staggering and increasing year over year. These statistics are from AV Test, an independent IT security institute. They show the steady climb of total malware over the past decade and the number of new malware created. In 2016, we reached 500 million forms of malware, with over 27 million different types of malware being created last year. That's over 74,000 new viruses every day. While this data is from 2016, it's safe to assume the numbers are even greater for 2017, and the threat is growing and it's becoming more and more sophisticated. So about ransomware. We know it's a hot topic right now, so we wanted to touch on it. Ransomware is a type of malware that prevents or limits users from accessing their system, either by locking the system screen or by locking the user's files unless ransom is paid. We're not going to get into too much specific detail about ransomware itself. We could do a whole presentation on the topic alone, but we will say the following. It's a growing problem with more variants showing up every day, and here's some brief data from a recent study by a partner of ours. Ransomware incidents are becoming more frequent in 2017. 86% of MSPs surveyed by the partner cited small business clients victimized by ransomware within the last 2 years, and 26% of managed service providers cited multiple attacks against clients in a single day. No industry, operating system, or device is safe from these attacks. Among the industry verticals who are targeted, most by ransomware attacks are construction, manufacturing, healthcare, professional services, and finance. It's interesting to note as well that software as a service or SaaS applications continue to be a growing target from ransomware attacks. With Dropbox, Office 365, and Google or G Suite most at risk. Mobile and tablet attacks are also on the rise. So historically, when everyone thought about malware or viruses, everyone was led to believe, or the common belief was that Windows was always what was being attacked and the only thing that could be attacked. But while they have been most vulnerable over time, other operating systems are not immune from these attacks. And the ransom, which experts urge companies not to pay, is not usually the most painful part. It's the downtime that hurts. How long can your organization last without access to the data that enables everyone to function? Paying a ransom, which doesn't guarantee you get your data back, actually. Often when you pay your ransom, they don't unencrypt the data, and you're out money, but you still don't have your files. It often tells these cyber criminals that you're willing to pay, and they are going to target you again. So any kind of ransomware attack, definitely the recommendation is not to pay the ransom. The best defense is truly a good offense. Put the right pieces in place to make sure your data is as protected as possible and quickly recoverable. Just a few other things to mention and a few other considerations when faced with a breach of any kind, not just ransomware. What kind of damage does it do to your organization's credibility and reputation? This isn't a tangible cost, but one that certainly has an impact. And what costs are associated with infrastructure repair? So I just want to quickly go over and brush over what is endpoint security, as it's really crucial in the fight against ransomware, data security breaches, malware, viruses. Basically, ransomware, endpoint security, I'll read it off the screen and then give it a little bit different of an example. It's a methodology of protecting the corporate network when accessed via remote devices such as laptops or other wireless or mobile devices. Each device with a remote connection to the network creates a potential entry point for security threats. Basically, the endpoint is the device that your users, your employees, your staff are using every day. That is generally, most commonly, the entry point to getting into your network and getting into your system. So that's what we're going to talk about a lot on there. While we talk about firewalls and some other things, that's what we're going to talk about a lot when it comes to endpoint security and data security. So the first line of defense, proactive prevention. So here's what we're here to tell you today is that there are concrete ways to protect your organizations. It's important to remember that inadequate protection exposes businesses to viruses, hackers, and data loss. It takes only one infected and one unpatched device to bring your entire network down. This is why it's essential for you to have a system in place to protect yourself proactively. Training, as we mentioned, we'll bring this up multiple times on the call. Your employees need to be informed and part of prevention efforts. Employee education is one of the key aspects for protecting your organization from data breaches and data loss. There are many behind-the-scenes steps you can take to help mitigate the risk of human error, but without proper education, some of these steps are made redundant. If you do not have corporate policies in place outlining acceptable computer use, that would be a great place to start initially. Educational pieces ongoing to show employees what an email infected with malware and/or viruses look like are also very important. There are even cases of phishing emails that look like someone internally is asking for money transfers when in fact it's an outside party looking to get money from you. So putting policies in place as an example to double check any request like that could save you a lot of money. As an example on this one, what can happen sometimes is an email will go to a controller coming from what would seem like your CEO, and saying, please transfer money to this account. And it has unfortunately happened where people don't second guess it and they send money out. So a good policy to be in place would be to not allow any transfers or accept any transfers without a phone conversation or an in-person acknowledgement to ensure that it's actually happening. And that was a legitimate request from the CEO. So these are just a few examples, but there are many more. To sum it all up, ongoing employee education is extremely crucial in the data security battle. Anti-spam. So when looking at security and protection, you should also be looking for a hosted anti-spam solution that's covering you at the domain level. Safeguarding traffic at the corporate domain level means that anything potentially hazardous gets caught before it can make it to your network. Many anti-spam solutions are implemented by a piece of software or hardware locally on the network. These solutions can cause extra stress on your network because the spam has actually entered your network before getting weeded out previously, and potential threats are already in your network as well and not weeded out before. While they still may not make it to your end users, the risk is definitely higher with these solutions. When you use a hosted domain-level anti-spam solution, you weed out emails before they hit your network, thus lowering your risk. Your users and network then only receive legitimate messages, not the 22,500 spam messages a hosted domain-level anti-spam solution blocks on average annually. Next, we have antivirus, anti-malware, or anti-everything, I guess, and then patch management. So these really protect corporate and remote users through a fully automated or targeted approach. Automation helps prevent human errors, which is key because we're humans, we do make mistakes. So given the sheer volume, the constant barrage of needed updates, automating those updates really help mitigate risk. Criticality assessment of vulnerabilities through continuous monitoring analysis is great as well. Another key one is real-time antivirus. Antivirus is important to try to mitigate human error, especially real-time antivirus. It's there to try and stop the employee from infecting the machine unknowingly. Having an antivirus on the machine that is there to run scans whenever the user feels like it, or perhaps you have it set up so there's a company-wide scan that happens only once a week, just really isn't good enough anymore. Another big way to lower the risk against malware and viruses is just keeping your systems patched, keeping those operating systems up to date with the latest security fixes. A lot of the malware and viruses out there are exploiting security holes in operating systems. So, people with a lot of time on their hands have gone into the operating systems, dug deep down in the code, and found a security hole. And most times patches actually come out to secure these holes, many times months before the actual attack is widespread. But if you haven't patched your devices, you're left vulnerable. Keeping all devices up to date with patches and virus definitions is definitely a tedious one. It's definitely time-consuming, but it's imperative to the protection of your infrastructure. We'll go to MDM. MDM stands for mobile device management. So that's really managing the mobile devices like phones or tablets in your network. So mobile devices are growing in install base, and as we sort of mentioned, historically everyone thinks that viruses or malware are only attacking Windows-based devices, but really where these hackers or the people that are trying to scam you or get you infected with malware, their real target is the highest install base, and that's generally why, for the most part, Microsoft and Windows get its attack. But as other install bases get higher and higher, they start moving towards that trend. So, as the install base of mobile devices grows, a proper MDM solution is really needed to ensure proper security of not only the device itself, but your network and your data. You want to protect your data in case the device is also lost or stolen. One of the difficulties with a tablet or a phone, it's easy to put in a pocket or a bag and walk out of a building. So with a proper MDM solution, you can put safeguards in place to ensure that your data is protected in case the device gets lost or unfortunately stolen. With the growth of mobile devices, like I mentioned, obviously they'll be targeted more. So with an MDM solution in place, you can mitigate risk, but really what it'll do is let you put rules in place on these devices, lock down the mobile devices to really limit what the users can do. It gets rid of the human factor. If you don't want the users to get into any of the settings of the device, you can lock it down that way. If you don't want them to be able to get email, you don't want them to be able to browse the internet, which are two main ways to get viruses or malware on your devices, the mobile device management solution can lock it down so that the device is really only used for what it's intended to do. And then firewalls. Pretty well every business out there has a firewall, or as Sean mentioned, an edge router. It is a necessity. The question really comes down to, do you have the proper firewall in place, or do you have the firewall configured to best practices to mitigate risk? So a firewall is basically the first entry point into your network after your internet provider for any incoming data, and then also the last point in your network before your internet provider in any outgoing data. So with the right firewall and firewall rules in place, you can really lower the risk of data breaches. You can filter what specific sites your end users have access to websites, or even block groups of websites. So you could block like social media as an example, and it blocks all types of websites in that category. Certain firewalls actually also have malware protection built into them now. So we've talked about anti-malware from the endpoint side of things, which is one great line of defense, but malware from the firewall level just adds another layer to help you out. There are also many rules on a firewall you can put in place to protect, against outside data, so hacking or breaches coming from the outside. But there's a lot of rules you can place, specifically when we're talking about malware ransomware, to detect that type of traffic from both inbound and outbound and block it before it actually happens. So to suffice to say, really, a firewall is a key part of your network and a very key part of this equation that we're talking about. All right, so we've discussed a lot of proactive methods to mitigate the risk of data breaches and data loss. You've educated your staff, You put that new hosted anti-spam solution I talked about in place, you upgraded your firewall, you made sure every device in your network is fully patched, has an antivirus, anti-malware solution, it's in place, everything's up to date, fantastic. So you're safe, right? Everything's perfect. You don't have to worry anymore, you can sleep restfully at night. Unfortunately, not necessarily. Again, we're going to go back to the human factor. We're human. We make mistakes. We accidentally delete something. We accidentally get malware. New malware and viruses also come out. They're called 0-day. They come out in the day of, and the virus program or the malware program doesn't have the updated fix on how to protect you against it. So while you've done a great job getting ahead of the game, you're still hit. So this brings in the last line of defense, backup and business and continuity. So we sort of touched on this a little bit before. How long can your organization go without access to critical data because some kind of security breach? How much downtime could your organization endure before an acceptable level of care was compromised? How much downtime could your organization endure before it became impossible for employees to function? And then how much downtime could your organization endure before it threatened financial viability of your organization? And in the case of lost data, how much data can you afford to lose, assuming you can afford to lose any? Could you lose an hour's worth of data? Could you lose a day's worth of data, or even a week? So let's define backup versus business continuity. So, because for some, business continuity is sort of a new thing. Backing up your data, ensures that if you lose your data, you have a backup somewhere of it. So depending on the type of issue you have, once you solve the problem, you solve the problem, you're having, you can go through your backups, retrieve your data, and then restore it. Business continuity takes us to another level. For starters, business continuity also does back up your data, so great, you're covered there. But then it really goes to another level in the fact that it really helps keep your business running during a disaster. So I'll get into sort of, one of the higher end levels of business continuity you can do, and I'll give you a couple examples of both, I'm going to base them both on a ransomware attack, one with just a backup solution in place and one with a business continuity solution in place. So for the first example, let's assume that the backup solution is tape backups. Your server just got hit with ransomware. It's encrypted the company's files. The employees now cannot do their day-to-day jobs because the files are inaccessible. You're not going to pay the ransom because we talked about that earlier, because you have backups of your data and you don't want to be targeted again. So you start getting the tapes together. You find the tape specifically, the most recent one, hopefully, and you start to restore all of the files that were encrypted with the data. So a few thoughts on this to really think and ponder. You're going to get back up, that's fine, but when was the last backup? So how far did you have to go back to get the data, and how much data did you lose? Where are the tapes? So sometimes people take the tapes, they take them off site, so you have to go to, sometimes people do like an Iron Manson situation, sometimes it ends up at someone's house, sitting on a desk somewhere, you have to go back there and pick it up. How long will it take to restore the files? Tape backups specifically do, take a little bit longer to do. It could be a few hours. It depends on how much, data has to be restored. And then what do employees do during this time? Do you have a setup where your employees still have work that they can do, or are you crippled and they have nothing to do and you're basically just burning money while the employees sit around and do nothing? It's really a lot to consider, but very often you have hours of downtime and a lot of manual work to do to get back up and running in this type of scenario. So if we view the same scenario but using a really phenomenal business continuity solution, we'll say again, your server just got hit with ransomware again. So they targeted you again, unfortunately. It's a terrible scenario, but we've lived it. You're going to restore your files, but it may take hours to restore those files because you've been through it before. A proper business continuity solution is taking full images of your server. So where certain backups may only actually take copies of the files, a business continuity solution is really going to take more or less a picture of your computer. It's going to back up the files. It's going to also back up the Windows operating system and the system files. Basically what we're going to do in this situation is while the downtime, you're restoring your files, you fire up your server. So this business continuity solution and device becomes your server. So while you're trying to restore files and get everything back and running, there's not the downtime to the end users. Your staff can continue to work while the other server is being fixed. So basically while that's happening, you go ahead, you're restoring the files into the old server. Once that's all done, traffic is then sent back to the server, And while there's a little bit of downtime to spin up the server and the other solution, the downtime is minimal compared to what it could have been. So basically, the whole point about business continuity is to just more or less continue to operate within a disaster rather than just living through the disaster and then recovering from it afterwards. All right, so cloud backup. So this is a newer one, but cloud, and we hear the term cloud all the time, to the cloud. So cloud backup, again, I think people, and since it's a newer thing, the cloud backup, people think that because you have all your email with Office 365, Microsoft's got your back and you can't lose any data, or same thing with G Suite or Google Suite. It's up in the cloud, it's all backed up fully. There's nothing that can ever happen to it. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily true. So we definitely want to touch on today the fact that even though the data is in the cloud, there is still a risk, and there are ways to protect yourself. So the number one cause of data loss with these solutions is, again, to reiterate myself, it's humans. It could be the fact that you've deleted some files out of your email on Office 365 and not realize you did it. But most people don't know that unless there's a backup solution in place, your data with Microsoft is going to delete within about 25 to 30 days. So what do you do if the person doesn't know that they deleted that file and it's on day 31? So this is where a cloud backup solution or a SaaS, software as a service backup solution is important. There is a small chance that the provider could have an outage. I'll give a specific example, and while it seems like rare, it's a rare thing, and it is possible. And while it's a small percentage, what if you're the one that is that percentage? In 2015, Google actually in Belgium, their data center got hit with 4 consecutive lightning strikes. I know the chances of that seem very rare, but it happened, and a very small percentage of data was lost. So again, while it seems like these conglomerates are infallible, they're not. So putting a solution in place like a cloud backup solution ensures peace of mind, and that's the sleepless, the restless nights, or the restful nights, I apologize, you can have by knowing that your bad data in the cloud is still backed up. So basically what they do is you put a backup solution in place so that while things are going up into the cloud to Office 365 or to G Suite, just for examples, the backups are then being put into a separate place. So if anything happens to the data centers, you're okay. And if anything happens where a human unfortunately deletes, possibly maliciously, possibly just because we're humans, your data's in a separate place and you're okay. It really gives your organization the ability to have control over corporate data stored in cloud platforms, even when issues arise. So EMR backups. You can see a couple of different things on here, items listed: local backup, dedicated printer, dedicated UPS, and monitoring. Really, the items on the list here should be considered a whole solution. It's really a package deal to keep EMR running. You shouldn't be looking at just implementing one of them. We all know here how important EMR is to the care of patients, but what happens if the internet or network goes down, or what happens if the building loses power? So you definitely don't want an issue like this to impact the delivery of care to your patients. The following solutions can be put in place to give you a peace of mind and to ensure proper administering of medicine continues even in the event of an outage. So I'll touch on local backups. So basically what's run here is there's some scripts that run on a specific device, a dedicated laptop, to take a backup locally of the EMR information, so that in case a network outage hits, or the power outage, which also takes you off the internet, you're still able to access that information locally. The next thing is a dedicated printer. So a dedicated printer is hooked up, and it's really specifically for this laptop. Your network printer that you have really won't fit the bill here, because in a power outage, that printer is going to go offline, and depending on what type of network outage it is, it could also make it unreachable from the laptop that we're talking about. And then, a UPS, a universal power supply, basically this is, for better terms, it's a battery backup. It's something that we're going to plug that printer into so that in case of that power outage, the printer still functions. The laptop obviously is going to be okay as long as it's fairly new or has a new battery in it. It's got a battery. It doesn't need the power outlet to run, but the printer will be. So with the UPS on there, when the power goes out, the printer will still be able to run. You'll use the laptop, you'll use the printer, and you'll print off the medical information you need. Now with these steps in place, you can print everything will be fine. But one more step, backups are great. But do you really want to test those backups and see if they actually worked during a disaster? In my opinion, the answer is no. I think that's too late because if they're not working, then you're not going to have that information available. So backups can and they really should be monitored. This isn't to ensure that they're functioning properly. If they aren't working properly, then you know before the disaster, and they need to be fixed before an issue arises. So as we know, EMR is critical to what we do in this sector, and you just need to ensure that you can administer medications accurately in the face of a disaster. So getting close to the end here, how to protect your organization. Be proactive about prevention. Don't have the thought of, it's not going to happen to me. Very often people react to these after it's happened, after it's hit, and that's where it's harder to recover for them, and there's lots of downtime that is occurred from any of these things or loss of data. Go into the mindset of, it's probably going to happen to me at some point, but I'm going to take some steps and put them in place to be ready for it when it does happen. Supported operating systems, current operating systems, this is a great one. For those who don't know, if you don't know, operating systems go end of life at a point. So as an example, I know Windows XP seemed like it stayed around for 45 years or so on the market. They kept extending end of life, but it eventually did go end of life. Same with Server 2003. When those operating systems go end of life, there's no more security patches for them. So if there's any exploits that these people who have the time on their hands to go find exploits still around that haven't been patched by Microsoft or by Mac and Apple, they're not going to get patches. So if they find those holes, they're just going to be holes. And you might think, hey, I have one XP machine on my network, it's no big deal. But that's really not true. That one machine is now a real huge gaping hole from a security threat onto your network. And then organizational training. I guess I'm a broken record on this one a little bit. It's really, educating, continuous education, because these things are changing. They're becoming more complex. They're becoming different. Organizational training of the employees there to make sure that they understand, what does a virus look like? What does malware look like? What should or shouldn't I do on this computer? That sort of thing. And then, again, backup that ensures continuity. So ensuring you have a really good backup solution in place to recover just in case all the steps that you're already taking don't work, and that with a business continuity solution that you can continue to operate in the case of a disaster. So closing thoughts. It's definitely a great line here. Data security often gets lumped onto IT shoulders, and so while IT really may lead the charge in this battle, it's really a company-wide effort. We just want to reiterate again that employee education is vitally important in this battle. Threats to data security are really going to continue to grow and become more complex and probably become more often and targeted. So we hope that we've been able to just arm you with a lot of information regarding data security and help prepare you for anything that may happen. So we're open to questions now. Obviously, we're through it a little bit quicker. So if there's any questions, please use the chat function. We also have a email address here available, seniorcaresales@careworx.com. If you have any questions you want to follow up after. My email address as well, if you want to reach out directly to me, is jason.brown@careworx.com. But if there's any questions right now, please use the chat function and ask away. So the question is, what kind of education is available for our staff? So there are definitely some there's some resources out there on the internet for this. We can also help with that too. If you'd like, I know who asked the question. We can definitely reach out and talk about it a little bit more. I can reach out personally to talk about some educational pieces that we can discuss for your staff. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for your time. Appreciate it. Hope you have a great rest of the day Tuesday and a great week coming up. Thank you.